See me now. So, okay, this is Brett Harris. We
Hi.
welcome him. He's with Virgo Law in Seattle, Washington. He specializes in business, starting of businesses, trademarks, copyrights, gaming laws, all the stuff that we need and are interested in starting our own business. He's very brave. He came from the Midwest, from through Missouri and Ohio, and came out west to see what it was like. And he loved it here and went to law school and started his practice. And the one thing I can say most about Brett is he understands the small business owner. He cares about the small business owner and he invests in the small business owner. So that's him. So welcome, Brett.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. Yeah, so I got a little about me slide, so I'll probably wait to jump into that until I pull it up, which I think it's like my first slide, of course. I did send Tish, excuse me, a handout to follow so that you can use to follow along with my presentation. So I don't know if everybody got one of those. You don't have to use it, but I think it does kind of help. So just want to make sure that's all out there. Also, just some things getting started. Let me know if you can't hear me, if I'm talking too fast, if I'm talking too slow, if anything happens. I won't be offended if you just, call out. Sometimes I feel like people are a little bashful on Zoom, and it gets a little awkward. So just tell me straight up, and I'll do what I can to fix it. So, and the first challenge here is going to be making sure I can present my screen the right way. So, actually, can you give me the screen sharing ability, whoever the host is?
Should be okay now.
All right, let's see here. Perfect. Okay. So I think this. And unfortunately, once I start sharing, I don't think I'm going to be able to see anybody, which could be a challenge. Are you guys able to see my PowerPoint presentation here?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's his PowerPoint.
Perfect. Do you see it here like this?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
All right. Perfect. And I can see some of you here. We got this nice closed captioning down at the bottom. I think that's really cool. All right. One more question. I can see everybody on the right side of my screen. Do you guys see all that too? Is that blocking any of my PowerPoint at all? Should I try and get rid of you? No? Okay. Perfect. All right. Cool. Well, here's a little bit about me. So, as Tish said, my family's from Missouri originally. I went to college in Ohio. I also spent some of my life in North Carolina growing up, but yeah, generally kind of have the Midwestern, a little bit of Southeastern roots. My mom was an attorney. She's now retired, but she was a personal injury attorney back in North Carolina, and she always worked with workers. She did a lot of workers' comp law. So she was always advocating for injured workers and kind of helping the little guy, so to speak. So she was kind of my inspiration to attend law school in the first place, but I wasn't super excited about going back to school after college. So I had to pick a cool place to go, decided to move out to Washington. So that's how I ended up out here. Plus I've always kind of wanted to adventure, and see new places. I love Washington. Sometimes I joke that I think the worst financial decision of my adult life was moving to Seattle, but it's hard to imagine leaving at this point. So I think I'm kind of stuck with it. So here's a little bit, some pictures of me. So here on the left, you see me, that's when I got sworn into the Washington State Bar. It's been about 4 or 5 years now, which is pretty crazy to me. You see how bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, nice clean haircut, no facial hair, those different days. These other pictures here, they're more recent. When I'm not doing lawyer stuff, I spend a lot of time outside hanging out with my dogs. So it's kind of what we're doing close to the Oregon border today. And you can also see these were taken during the pandemic. So you see I started looking a little scraggly during those days, but I think a lot of people did. And then I include this picture of Boeing 787. So when I first graduated law school, my first job was working for Boeing in-house. There, mostly I negotiated contracts to buy airplane parts, which was pretty cool. But But, I soon found that it wasn't really what I was passionate about. And like Tish said, I realized that I really wanted to work with the small businesses, and I, find that to be much more exciting and interesting rather than just, negotiating all these extremely wordy, complicated contracts between parties that have tons of attorneys. So that's a little bit about my background. So yeah, a little bit about my law firm. So I started Virgo Law about 2 years ago, mid pandemic, I guess. So and I really love it. So the goal of my law firm is to be sort of the outside in-house counsel for entrepreneurs and small and medium-sized businesses. And what that really means is most companies, especially large publicly traded companies, they have huge legal teams of in-house counsel, and they take care of everything from employment, intellectual property, writing the contracts, supporting that process that they're needed. But a lot of small businesses don't have that, and they need a lot of those same kind of services. They need somebody they can call to check in. So that's really my goal, and I work with businesses all across, that range. I have a lot of clients who are just solo entrepreneurs, just getting started. They don't even know if their business is going to take off, to more complex clients with, major contracts with publicly traded companies, that kind of stuff. So the high level, what I do, a lot of business entity formation and management for small businesses like yourselves. Is probably more on the formation side, because hopefully you have a good business entity that is easy to manage, and we'll talk a little bit about that during this presentation. Contract writing, review, and negotiation is probably the bread and butter of my practice. Intellectual property, I do a lot of protecting businesses' brands and their content. And then general compliance. So that's something that kind of comes into play once you have more of an established relationship with your attorney. But compliance is what kind of licensing you need, what happens if you got a disgruntled employee who's making threats about your company. You rent some commercial real estate for your business, and you have a landlord who's just being difficult or not following the contract. That would be kind of when I step in and research the laws and try and enforce, whatever's going on there, or at least make it find the least bad outcome for your business. So I put here that I specialize in Washington law. A lot of what I do is not really necessarily state specific. There are some things like, for example, employment laws that may be state specific, but I'm obviously able to research those very easily myself. So for most businesses, contract drafting, intellectual property, I can work with businesses all over the country, and including Oregon specifically for this situation. The only thing I probably couldn't do for you is just form your own business entity, because I am not able to act as a registered agent in Oregon because I don't have a license there. But I guess a recent example of where this came into play is I did have a company that had some employees in California, and they wanted to terminate one of their contracts. So they asked me, what do we have to watch out for in California? Is there any kind of tricky loopholes? Turns out it is actually very difficult to terminate a California employee. So I learned a lot in that experience, and that's kind of an example of me practicing law outside of Washington. And then my law firm is all virtual. I think when people think about attorneys, they think about having to schedule an appointment, show up in the middle of the day. They're going to make you sign some paperwork there in the office. But that's really not what I do at all. Most of my meetings are over Zoom or over the phone. I send my contracts out through virtual software. And then most of my relationship with my clients is just over email from that point on. So that's a little bit about Virgo Law for you. So here's my presentation format for today. We're going to start talking about business entity formation, licensing. We're going to cover contracts briefly at a very high level. Then we're going to talk about intellectual property, specifically trademarks and copyrights. And then at the end, hopefully we'll have enough time to do a quick little case study, maybe apply what you learned. And it'll be an example from one of my clients who I think is in a similar industry as you. I have not worked with any hypnotherapists directly yet, but I do have a fair amount of, I'd say 2 or 3 naturopath clients, and 2 of them focus on mental health care a lot. So I think that's in the same vein, at least. And then I'll leave time for questions after each section, so that way we don't get distracted. You're still thinking about business entities while I'm talking about trademarks. I don't, it's kind of confusing stuff. It's kind of dry stuff. We'll just knock out all the questions right away. So section 1, business entity formation and licensing. So from a high level, and everything I talk about today, please keep in mind, is just from a very high level. Each business has unique business legal needs. So of course, everything I say during this presentation may not be exactly what's perfectly right for your business, but it should help you start thinking about the right things, at least. And that's my goal here today, to at least know what you should be thinking about. So from a very high level, there are essentially 3 types of business entities that a business operating for profit may want to be. If you go to register a business entity, you'll see a huge drop-down list of a lot of options, but they're all essentially variations of these 3 things. So the first type is a sole proprietorship. I find that a lot of my small business clients start as a sole proprietorship, and usually my first goal is to make them not be a sole proprietorship. The second type is a limited liability company, and that is the perfect business entity for small businesses. And then the final one is a corporation. And corporations are very difficult to manage. They have a lot of legal requirements. You're required to write bylaws for a corporation. You're required to have annual meetings and file notes on your annual meetings, those kinds of things. And I have some clients who, I don't know why they decide to go with a corporation, but they do go with a corporation, and they're just not prepared for that. And there's a lot of cleanup, or sometimes it's just, let's get you out of the corporation and have you be a limited liability company. So all that's to say, I love limited liability companies. They're one of the best business entities. And so when you're thinking about what the right business entity is for you, or really almost any small business, I think about these business entity options as like Goldilocks and the 3 bears. The sole proprietorship, it has too little liability protection. You leave your personal assets very exposed to your business debts. Corporation, just too difficult to manage. It's really meant for more complex organizations. So it's just too much. But the limited liability company is just right. That's the perfect one. It gives you all the liability protection you need. There's very few regulations about what you actually need to do in order to maintain your limited liability company. So that's the perfect one. And as a little side note, I also think it's very cool. I was a history major in college, so I love history. And cool thing about limited liability companies is it is one of the newest, it might even be the newest business entity to be invented in the United States. And it was first created by the state of Wyoming in the, I think, late 1970s. And the idea behind it was there was really no option for small businesses to have the same liability protection as a corporation without having the same corporate governance requirements as a corporation. So Wyoming invented this idea of a limited liability company. It stuck pretty soon after. Every state in the United States adopted one. So that's just the way to go. And I think that's cool because I really view it as a gift. I think we're lucky to be in a time where we have limited liability company available. I know that's kind of a, maybe a very nerdy kind of business law perspective on it, but I think it's awesome. I would hate to not have that option and be trying to run a business. So kind of mentioned this or started talking about it, but there's 2 reasons that you should be a limited liability company. The first is liability protection. A limited liability company generally protects your personal assets from your business's debts and liabilities. The second reason is that LLCs have flexible tax options. So you can choose to be taxed either as a sole proprietorship or as an S corporation. And that's a little bit confusing because unfortunately the tax language is the exact same as the business entity language. Take that up with the IRS. I don't know who had that idea, but it's a little confusing, but basically you can choose to be taxed as one of two business entities, and it very much changes what you're paying at the end of the year. So I'll go into a little bit more on that here in a couple slides. So, first benefit of a LLC is you have the liability protection. I think the easiest way to explain how this works in practice is just to give you a little hypothetical, so you can see how it would play out. So here's a hypothetical. Let's say, I'm sure you guys can read it, but you guys' pictures are actually blocking my screen. So let's say a client trips and falls one day when they're walking into your office for a hypnotherapy appointment, and they're seriously injured. And by serious injury, I mean, maybe broken arm, hopefully it's not, can't be that serious. But they sue your business and they secure a judgment against your business for the damages. And sometimes a good plaintiff's attorney is going to figure out how to get, more money than just the cost of getting a cast for your arm, unfortunately. So as a sole proprietorship, the client may be able to seize your personal assets to pay for the damages. And this includes assets in your bank accounts or investment accounts, personal vehicles, property even. Whereas in an LLC, the LLC generally shields your personal assets from any liability. It really just, just like a shield, completely blocks it off. And in most cases, that means that they can only collect from your LLC. So if we're talking a worst case scenario here, and unfortunately, kind of downside of talking with attorneys is my job is to anticipate worst case scenarios and help make sure you're protected in those situations. So sometimes, it gets to be kind of a, not great conversation, but in a worst case scenario here, if a client somehow secures a major judgment against you, then, and your business can't cover it and you're an LLC, then the LLC could even go bankrupt and you wouldn't have to declare personal bankruptcy, and you could really walk away more or less unscathed other than the damage to your business. So the liability protection in a limited liability company is huge. And yeah, it's just sole proprietorship just leaves you way too exposed as a business owner. And then the second benefit of an LLC is that it gives you a lot of tax flexibility, or it gives you a couple of options, as I mentioned before. And before talking about this, I do want to say I am not a tax expert. For tax questions, you definitely want to be working with an accountant, and they will better be able to advise you on these things. But this is the high level of how it plays out. So by default, LLCs are taxed as sole proprietorships. And a sole proprietorship essentially combines your business's income tax with your personal income tax. And this is called pass-through taxation because the taxes from your business pass through to you personally. Your tax is your personal income tax rate. The main drawback of a sole proprietorship, at least in my opinion, having been taxed as a sole proprietorship my first year in business and having that not be the most pleasant experience, is that you have to pay the self-employment tax, which is huge. So you can really just avoid that all around by being taxed as an S corporation. The way an S corp is taxed, or at least if your LLC is taxed as an S corporation, the way that is taxed is that the LLC is treated as a completely separate entity from yourself, and then you as the owner become essentially an employee of your limited liability company. So a lot of people perceive that as a drawback because you're essentially getting taxed twice for two separate things that, in many cases, the LLC is essentially you. But accountants seem to agree across the board. And again, I'm much more of a words guy than a numbers guy. So I wish I could crunch the numbers for you, but it's just not in my wheelhouse. But accountants will agree across the board that you pretty much will save money during tax season if you're taxed as an S corp. There are some drawbacks to being taxed as an S corp. The main thing is that it is a little bit more difficult to manage. You do have to do federal tax withholding, for example, when you pay yourself like an employee. It's much more important that your books are kept very well. Let me see here. I'm blanking on the last thing. But yeah, essentially the reality is if you decide to be taxed as an S corporation, you work with an accountant, the accountant's probably going to be wanting to work on your books on a monthly basis. So you are looking at an extra expense every month paying for an accountant. But I think it's definitely worth it. And I would say generally the right time to start thinking about being taxed as an S corp is if your business is stable, you're making a good living wage, then that's probably the time to start thinking about being taxed as an S corp. A lot of resources online say $60,000 revenue is the right time to think about it. That's seems like way too much of a generalization in my opinion, but I think it's, I guess, a good baseline. The one other drawback of being taxed as an S corp is that because you're paying yourself as an employee, you cannot just take money out of your business account whenever you want to, which probably isn't the best practice, but I know I've done that a couple times, like this, this is a good month and, I think I should get a little more out of this. So, but once you're being taxed as an S corp, then those days are pretty much over for the most part. So again, good conversation to have with your accountant if you are already an LLC or if you're thinking about becoming an LLC. I'm sure any accountant would love to talk to you about this, at least one that works with small businesses. So high level, how to form an LLC. Unfortunately, in my experience, in my opinion anyway, states should be very good and very proactive about telling you how to form your LLC to make sure you've done all the steps correctly. In my experience, that is not the case. It takes a lot of kind of digging around. You pretty much already have to know where to go to even find the information. But from a high level, the steps to forming an LLC don't change that much from state to state. So of course, I'm most familiar with Washington, but Oregon should be very similar. The first step is you register your business entity with your state Secretary of State. The second step is you get an employer identification number with the IRS. Third step is you apply for a business license with your state's Department of Revenue. And then the final step is you get a city business license from the city where your business is located. The city business license can be kind of the hardest part because depending on how good your city is at updating public information in their websites, maybe it may be hard to find. In Washington, you can get your city business license for some cities, not all cities, through the Department of Revenue website. So I see some of you are taking notes here, so let me know if you want me to hang out on this slide. I'll give you a couple seconds. All right. So this is just a little pitch for one of my products, but I do have a Washington LLC formation guide available for purchase on my website. It's only $75. I think it's the best deal you're going to find anywhere. I know I have a lot of clients that work with online resources like Rocket Lawyer to form their LLC and write their contracts. I highly advise not doing that. They do an okay job with LLCs. They do a pretty terrible job with contracts. So that's definitely no reason for contracts, but we can get into that in the contract section of my presentation. But also what I found is I know for me and then for a lot of my colleagues, we generally charge the same as these online resources to form an LLC. So generally it's good to have a good business entity to work with for your business, good business attorney to work with for your business. And LLC formation is a good way to kind of start that relationship. All right, and just a little bit of expectations about forming an LLC. So the cost of forming an LLC is about $400. These prices are based on Washington prices, but just like the formation steps, the costs seem to be pretty much the same across the country for the most part. But the prices are set by the state, of course. So formation cost is about $400, and that is just filing fees. So all the steps I mentioned before are going to ask you to pay a filing fee, except you can get your EIN number from the IRS for free. In fact, if you find yourself trying to get an EIN number from the IRS and they try and charge you, you're probably not on the actual irs.gov website. You're probably through some private business that's just trying to trick you into spending some money. And then after you form the LLC, you do have to pay about $150 in annual maintenance fees. And by that, I just mean the Secretary of State's going to want you to file an annual report. Department of Revenue is going to want you to renew your license, and you have to do that every year. So that's about the yearly cost. And excuse me, the main reason I want to emphasize that is one of my biggest frustrations with people whose businesses are sole proprietorships is they frequently think that they are cheaper to form and manage. And it's really not the case. It's not that much cheaper in Washington anyway, maybe $20 cheaper to form and manage in a sole proprietorship that is a LLC. And with an LLC, you're just getting way more bang for your buck. So I think just even from a financial perspective, I think an LLC is the way to go. And then finally, licenses. So in Washington, you do need a license to practice hypnotherapy. I went ahead and looked into this for you guys. I don't think that would apply to you if you are working with clients who live in Washington. But if you are going into Washington to perform services at all, then you do need a license. And they do have rules set forth, training requirements, all those things, education requirements through the Washington Department of Health website. In Oregon, it looks like there are no licensing requirements for hypnotherapists. So you may need a license to just provide therapy services generally. You guys probably maybe more knowledgeable about that down in Oregon than I am. I did see that back in 2005, the Oregon Senate did try to pass a new bill requiring hypnotherapists to have licenses. That's been a long time now. I keep forgetting, but so I guess those days are probably over. But something that's apparently it's been discussed at least, so something to keep in mind for the future. And there are, I think, based on my research, there's about 7 to 10 states that require hypnotherapists to have licenses, but the majority do not. All right, so that's my quick little overview about business entities and licensing. I hope the main takeaway is if you're not an LLC, you should be an LLC. And if you are an LLC, then I hope you learned some new things about managing an LLC. And please go ahead and let me know if you have any questions. Oh, and I can only see. Well, actually, you know what? I think I can see. Figure this out. I did see Joni. Looks like she was raising her hand.
Yeah.
So you guys can go. You guys can call out too. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I had 2 questions.
Mm-hmm.
One is, so does that mean that we don't need to have an annual meeting if we have an LLC?
Yeah, that's correct.
Cool. And then the other thing is if the LLC has the liability, does that mean that I should be taking out as much money as I can and giving it to myself so that it's not in there in case somebody falls and breaks their arm?
Yeah, I mean, that is not a bad strategy. I think you're definitely thinking you're on the right path there. So yeah, that is one way to look at it. Of course, the example I gave you, I think is rare. So it's probably better to focus on, managing your business in a financially responsible way rather than anticipating, a potential judgment. But yeah, that is one way to look at it. And some things that people do, particularly when they have a lot of assets, is they'll form separate LLCs to kind of hold different assets. The problem with that is if you just have an LLC that you're just trying to use as a shield for your assets, it probably won't hold up. The court's probably going to find that it's just a fake business essentially, and not give you that same liability protection. So, but certainly, yeah, you're thinking along the right path there. And there's one. Oh yeah, and there is one exception to when an LLC will not give you full liability protection, and that's if the owner acts in a way, or the business acts in a way, that is considered grossly negligent. In that case, you could be personally liable for your business. You would pretty much have to know you're doing something wrong to be found to be grossly negligent. You know, nobody's gonna say you're grossly negligent because a tile on your floor, cracked while somebody was walking on it and they fell. But you know, if we don't need to go over grossly negligent examples. Just do the right thing, and then you'll probably be okay.
So I had a question about a single entity LLC as opposed to being an S corporation. What's the
Yeah.
difference between the two?
So an S corporation functions more like a corporation. It's kind of like an S corporation can never be publicly traded. It would have to transition to what is called a C corporation. But an S corporation does have those requirements of having bylaws that probably should have been written by an attorney or reviewed by an attorney. You're also supposed to write annual meetings. So those are kind of the challenges with the S corporation business entity, and that's why an LLC is generally easier to manage. But I would say being an S corporation is also much better than being a sole proprietorship. So one of the big takeaways here is just make sure you're not a sole proprietorship, because you will not have that liability protection.
Because in Oregon, you can be a single entity LLC, which means you're the only person that owns the LLC. And you don't have to have the bylaws or anything like that. And you use your social security number as your tax ID number.
Yeah. For the
But it's still an
LLC, or
LLC.
for
Mm.
yeah. So yeah, that's exactly right. So that would be classic. With the tax example as well, that'd be classic LLC pass through taxation, where you and your LLC are essentially taxed as the same person or entity. And then I thought we saw one more with Lakshmi. Are you
Yeah,
raising your hand?
yeah. I'm trying to get my practice all online. And so when working in other states, if I would have a client in Washington that does have laws of having to be licensed in order to do hypnotherapy, should I avoid clients from that state since I'm not licensed in Oregon? Or I have other licenses, but I'm not a therapist.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So that is a little trickier question. First off, my guess is that it would change state by state as far as the requirements. There could be a requirement that if you're bringing your business into the state that you have to be licensed. Unfortunately, I did not have an opportunity to look into this question specifically, but I was, I was concerned that it would come up. I figured it probably would come up with Oregon and Washington being so close. So if you'd like to send me an email, I'll provide my email contact information after this. You can email me and we can discuss whether or not you run the risk of having any liability for providing services in Washington, even though you don't have a hypnotherapy license in Washington.
Yeah, and I'm also a naturopath, and I wanted to know that for naturopath, but we could do that on email.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, and that's then we're getting really deep into it. But I will say, for the most part, you'll usually only need a license in the place where you're operating from for virtual businesses. It's getting a little challenging with virtual businesses these days, I've found, especially post-COVID, because a lot of the laws about licenses and even just business entities like LLCs don't really contemplate what happens when a lot of the economy and a lot of small businesses are providing services online like this. So a lot of times there's just a lot of gray area of, do I need to have another business entity in Washington, or do I need to appear as a foreign LLC in Washington? And for the most part, you do not, but it does get a little grayer when it comes to licensing.
Yeah, that with Oregon, originally they had said if you establish the relationship in Oregon and someone and you've seen them in your physical office, then they can go to other places and you can still treat them by phone or email or whatever. But you have to establish the relationship in Oregon. And now I don't know what they're doing. Because it's,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking, well, I maybe should just get a health coach license or something, you know? So I could practice. in
Yeah,
any state.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, and I think that you bring up a good point too, of making it very clear in that kind of situation that your office is in Oregon. You know, I would recommend, we're gonna talk about contracts here in a second, but maybe if you have a services agreement saying that you're headquartered in Oregon and you are providing services from Oregon under the laws of Oregon, and you know, that would make it much harder for somebody like the Washington Department of Health to come in, you know, because the first thing they would ask a consumer is, you know, did you know that they were in Oregon? You know, did you know that they weren't in Washington? If they say yes, or if you're able to show that they should have known if they're paying attention, then that goes a long way into protecting your personal or your liability in that situation.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. All right. Awesome. First section down. So now we're going to go into contracts. Well, let me double check. Was that everybody's questions? I don't think I saw any other hands up, but want to make sure I didn't miss anybody.
Just a minute.
That looks like all of them.
All right. Okay, great. Sorry, I didn't know we were waiting on anybody. Then my screen kind of blanked out. Is my internet holding up for you guys? I'm getting a low internet, slow connection warning, but I'll do my best to troubleshoot it.
Okay, I had a question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was muted and I couldn't get it off. Sorry about that.
You're all right.
I have a question on the insurance for liability. Does that not cover a person with their sole proprietorship?
Yeah, an insurance should cover sole proprietorship. Of course, it's kind of the same with taxes. I can't advise you on, you know, I'm not an insurance broker, so you know, an insurance broker probably has much better input. But I'm not aware of a situation where a sole proprietor was not able to get insurance because they're a sole proprietorship.
Right, but as far as would that cover when?
Yeah. So I think it'd be covered. The concern would be if the insurance doesn't cover the whole claim, you know, if you can't afford the deductible or things like that.
Right.
You know, that then the debt, you know, you would be personally responsible for that debt in a sole proprietorship.
Okay, it was my understanding we should carry about $1 million worth, at least.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds pretty standard for what I've seen for small business insurance contracts. Definitely highly recommend having insurance. But again, that's not something that I can directly advise you on as far as what policy should cover. You know, frankly, I barely even understand my own malpractice insurance policy. So
Okay.
they tell me it's enough, you know, and I say, hey, great.
Right.
Haven't needed yet.
Okay, so and maybe in the meantime, before I'm able to set it up as an LLC, I can do that. You know, so there's a kind of a gap there. So
Yeah, definitely a good way to go there. And then that I guess one final point to say about LLCs is, unfortunately, at least in Washington, the only business entity that cannot be converted to another business entity is a sole proprietorship, which is another major drawback about sole proprietorships, although it doesn't impact small businesses usually too much, but you would have to form a whole new LLC.
okay, I just renewed my mine because it was due, and so even if I did want to change over, you say I cannot do that, or you can.
No, you cannot. So you would have to, you'd have to form a whole new LLC. So unfortunately, yeah,
I
yeah,
see.
the filing fee, you'd be out that filing fee for the most part.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, I would say the good news on that is, converting a business entity to another type of business entity is a lot of work, mostly from my end, and it's very hard to do on your own. So it's probably cheaper to just form a new business entity at that point anyway. So
okay,
I wouldn't say you're losing out on a whole lot there, compared to
Right.
converting your business entity.
right,
So,
okay, all right, thank you.
yep. All right, more questions? We got Lakshmi, you got another one? I think you might be muted.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there.
Life coaching, do you have experience with that
Um,
as far as,
not representing anybody who does it. I
Okay.
am part of a small business group that we have a life coach, but that's
Mhm.
my experience mostly.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
but yep. But of course, always happy to look into these things for you guys as well. Okay. All right. Well, we will move on to contracts. Probably gonna be the driest section, although I personally love contracts. I do like to think of myself as a good writer. I don't write for fun too much these days because I'm pretty much writing all day for work. But probably the most creative writing that I get to do is with contract terms, and I do pride myself on trying to make contracts very easy to understand for my clients and their customers. So I personally love contracts, but they are a little dry to discuss. So that's my warning going in. So to start, why are contracts important? And I think there are three big reasons that they are important. And it's also kind of funny because this list shows you how a situation might escalate if you have a dispute with a party that you have a contract with. And of course, contracts are not always between the business and the customer. Frequently, contracts are between a vendor or somebody who's providing services for you one time or ongoing. Commercial lease is a type of contract. So we're not always thinking about unhappy customers here. But I think the most important reason that contracts are, the most important reason that contracts are important is because they set expectations between the party. And I think about that as just communication 101. And a lot of times you can avoid conflict over a contract or resolve a conflict without engaging an attorney just by having good, clear expectations put in writing, setting forth the terms of the contractual relationship. The second reason I think contracts are important is because they also help you resolve disputes more quickly. And this is, I kind of think of it as, let's say you weren't able to work it out on your own and you call somebody like me, who's primarily a business transactional attorney. I try to stay out of courts for the most part. I don't do much litigation, although I have many colleagues that do, and sometimes I do refer clients to them. But a lot of times if I get involved, I can send a quick letter or email saying, look, this is what the contract says. So, you're really going to try and fight this. You don't want to go to court over this. So it does give you a lot of power to be able to just resolve a dispute quickly without having to escalate it to the next level. And then let's say that you were not able to resolve a dispute without actually litigating it and fighting over it. Then a contract controls where and how disputes are litigated. And by that, I mean, where means, what jurisdiction, what city, what county, those kinds of things. I generally advise my clients to make sure that disputes are litigated in or near big cities, counties where there's a big city. I've represented a client out here in Chelan County, Washington. I don't know if you know where that is, but it's out in the sticks. Beautiful area with a lot of amazing hikes and a lot of amazing alpine lakes. There's not very many amazing attorneys, and the courthouse does not do any kind of e-filing or anything like that. So it means you actually have to drive out there and file things in person or send letters to the court.
Right.
Most attorneys are not going to want to do that. So it's very hard to litigate a case somewhere like Chelan County. So that's how contract can control where the disputes are litigated. And then there's also some options about how a dispute is litigated. Some contracts include mandatory mediation terms, which is not really litigation, but I'd say mediation is probably the closest step to actual litigation before going to litigation. So mandatory mediation might say, hey, we at least got to sit down with a professional mediator and try and talk about this and see if we can find a resolution before going to court. The good thing about that is mediators, usually a retired judge, they kind of will guide the clients into, figuring out whether or not this is worth fighting for. If one person really thinks they're right and they just don't have a good case, so the mediator's probably going to tell them, hey, you need to settle this here. It's only going to get worse for you. There's also the option, instead of actually going to court, going to a state or federal court to litigate a matter, you can do what's called arbitration. And arbitration, it's usually in front of a panel of retired judges through a private arbitration provider. I don't think there's any better name for them. And the main benefit of arbitration is you can get in there much quicker. You file a lawsuit, the court's probably going to put it on their calendar a year later. If there's an opposing counsel, that opposing counsel is almost always going to ask to extend the trial out another 6 months to a year. So if you go to a traditional court, you're looking at about 2 years before a trial. You go to something like arbitration, you're looking at 3 to 6 months, depending on the complexity of the issue. Arbitration is also thought of as being a lot cheaper. You do have to pay the arbitrators because they're not in state employees like a judge. So whether or not it ends up being cheaper in practice is, questionable. It kind of depends on the case, but that's another benefit, perceived benefit of arbitration anyway. So I tried to guess about what kind of contracts a hypnotherapist I would recommend for a hypnotherapist client, or at least that I could see being a part of their legal concerns. So first one, services agreements. Second one, commercial lease, probably something that a lot of you have entered into, although I'm sure less likely or less common these days. And then finally, an employment agreement. I'm also going to do something that I probably shouldn't do here, but by employment, I also mean if you are a contractor, you are hiring contractors. In the legal world, very different things. From a contractual standpoint, they'll probably say pretty much the same thing. There'll be one term that says you're not an employee. That's the main difference. So what is the services agreement? Very quickly, I think most people usually know this once I explain it, but I think they're a little confused when I first call it a services agreement. So services agreement is the contract that you should ask your clients to sign before they start working with you. The services agreement sets forth the terms of your business's relationship with your client and vice versa. So for example, I ask my clients to sign what's called an engagement letter. For some reason, attorneys like calling their services agreements engagement letters. I don't know why that is, but it does sound kind of cool in some ways. So, and I am kind of constantly changing my engagement letter because I like to lean into more of the clear communication in mind. So what I'd like to change now that I haven't quite gotten around to yet, but I'd like to say, I'd like to add a term in there that says, this is how you can contact me, and these are the reasonable expectations you should have about how long it'll take for me to get back to you. It's a little extra, but, again, I think it helps avoid conflict. Hopefully they read it. I'd like to think people read it. I don't always read my contracts, so it's hard to say, but even if they didn't read it, they can't be that mad at me, I don't think, if it's in there. So. Excuse me. So here's a high level of the important terms that should be included in a services agreement. I think everybody cares about the payment terms. You know, a lot of times I'll get a call from a client and they ask me to review their contract for services, and it's pretty much just payment terms, and sometimes not even the most important payment terms. So I hesitate to put that first on the list, but they are very important. So I guess it's not totally missing the mark. Of course, everybody really cares about how much you get paid, but it's also important to say how you accept payment. So credit card, ACH, check, cash, and then also when. Do you charge your clients at the end of the month, after each session, at the time of the session? You want them to pay within 48 hours of the session, those kinds of things. So that's all very important to clarify. And in a lot of ways, I think the how much is the least important. And interestingly, it's the same way in the when I was working at Boeing in the aerospace industry, the exact same thing. The thing we'd fight about the most sometimes is, are you paying us within 30 days? Are you paying us within 60 days? And that could stall a whole contract, and it didn't even matter how much they're paying. So another thing people tend to overlook, it seems very obvious, but I think it's easy to forget, is the services that you will provide under the agreement. And then kind of going hand in hand with that, it's important to say what services you will not provide under the agreement. And I would say a lot of my clients get in disputes with their clients because their clients had expectations of them that were not necessarily fair given the circumstances. I recently spoke with a business coach, a professional business coach, and she was having problems with one of her clients because they were basically treating her like she was the business's HR department, and like there was some dispute with an employee. The employee was calling her to give her notice that she was quitting. The employer was saying, well, you need to do this and this. And my client was like, that's not my job. I'm just coaching here. I have nothing to do with employment. I have nothing to do with HR. I cannot act as an agent for your company. So sometimes, especially if you find yourself running into these kind of confusing situations where people think you should be doing something that you don't do, it's very important to say what you will not do. Also important to say when services will be provided. Particularly that's the case if you have an ongoing relationship with your client. They come in for an appointment every 2 weeks, every week, something like that. Term and termination, how long is the agreement in place? Do you ask them to sign a new agreement at the end of the year? If they want to terminate it, do they have to give you any notice beforehand? If you want to terminate it, do you have to give them any notice? Can you terminate it just because you don't want to work with them anymore? Do you have to terminate it because they did something wrong or because you did something wrong, which is called termination for cause? There's always a lot of language limiting your liability. Even though a limited liability company will protect your business or protect your personal assets from the business's liabilities, it's also important to protect the business's liabilities. So there's a lot of language that you can add to a contract. Depending on the matter, may not be enforceable, but it's always good to say, we don't take responsibility if this happens. Or I guess in hypnotherapy, it's hard to imagine a third party could get involved, but if somehow your client injures a third party and it's loosely related to your business, you can say, we don't have anything to do with this. Let's say they get in a car accident pulling out of the parking lot and the passenger is hurt and they were just sitting in the car the whole time. They can't say that your business is responsible because that's the reason they were there. Like I discussed before, services agreements also set forth the jurisdiction and means of dispute resolution. So again, what city, county, do you do mediation? Do you do arbitration? Do you go to court? And then finally, a big one for service providers, who pays attorney fees if you get into a lawsuit. Usually an attorney fee clause will say the loser will pay for the winner's attorney fees. That comes up a lot of times with my small business clients if they're contracting through a larger organization, because if they do have a dispute with that organization, there's no way that they can bankroll a lawsuit without an attorney fee provision. And then probably more directly for your clients, or for your relationship with your clients, who pays the collection costs if they don't pay? hopefully that doesn't happen too much. I've been fortunate so far to not have any clients refuse to pay, but one option, if that is an issue, is to hire some kind of collection agency or a law firm that does that. And if there's a term in there that says that the client agrees to cover the collection costs, then that means that they will essentially pay the fees of collecting the money from them if you do have to hire somebody outside for payment. So it's a high-level services agreement. I wouldn't say it's an exhaustive list of everything that's included, but the big takeaway here is don't just put payment terms in your services agreements because there's a lot more to worry about there. And then quick note here, I love e-signatures. E-signatures are a great thing. I have used DocuSign and HelloSign. I currently use HelloSign for my engagement letters. They just save you a lot of time. It's super easy to have. I just have a PDF that pretty much has fill in the blanks, and then I'm able to fill in the blanks on the e-signature software. Also saves the trees. I always try and go with the paperless billing option. Of course, I've been on these computers pretty much my whole life, so I'm not that good at managing paper anyway. So it's easy for me to stay away from paper. And the other important takeaway, sometimes I get this question, but I'm not aware of any court that has said that an e-signature is not enforceable. So for all intents and purposes, e-signature is as good as a wet signature. The legal industry has actually been doing e-signatures internally for a long time. We just do like a /s/ in the name. So I think it's pretty accepted. Yeah, I think that's everything I'd say about e-signatures there. All right, I thought I had one more comment about e-signatures, but I'll circle back if I have anything else to say. Main takeaways, they're great. All right, commercial lease agreements. If you have an actual physical office space post-pandemic, then this is probably something that you're familiar with. If you haven't seen one before, or if you have seen them, you probably realize that they are similar to just a regular residential lease agreement. There are some more terms. Sometimes they sound a little scarier, but for the most part, they're the same. And it's a little bit harder to negotiate these agreements. Residential landlords are kind of sticklers, as landlords tend to be. But there are some things that you may be able to negotiate in there. One of them is renewal notice. That's pretty huge. So renewal basically means what happens with the contract when it ends. A lot of leases will have a automatic renewal for a 1-year term or something like that after the end of the initial lease term. So you just want to make sure you're familiar with that. Both to know whether or not you're secure in your space, or if you need to think about moving or renegotiating the agreement, and then also knowing if you need to provide any kind of notice if you do not want the contract to renew. And that's why I put notice here too. There's usually a notice term that says if you do not want to renew a commercial lease, you need to provide your landlord with like 60 days notice or 90 days notice, and it's usually kind of a long time. So you want to make sure you're on top of it. Other terms, you may be able to negotiate early termination. A lot of times landlords don't want to provide you with a way of getting out of the contract. I usually think that's a really bad contracting strategy, because if a dispute does arise, you pretty much want both parties to be able to get out of it. In theory, you're thinking, oh, great, they're going to be stuck here. Like, they're going to have to pay me no matter what. In practice, usually if things go bad enough, neither party wants to interact with each other, just let them go. So maybe worth trying to negotiate some kind of early termination clause in there. And a landlord will probably only give you early termination for a cause of some sort. So if they're not taking care of their the stuff they need to be taken care of, you got leaky pipes and they haven't taken care of it. Subletting, also a major term. So can you rent your commercial space out to other people? This sometimes comes up with small businesses where the owner has a more established business, and then they're starting a new business, and they may want the new business to rent the space from the established business, and you could limit the subletting to a situation like that. And then again, just payment terms. When do you get paid, or when do you have to pay it? Can they increase the amount of rent for any reason? Like inflation, like we're experiencing right now. So those are things to think about there. Commercial leases frequently include personal guarantees. So personal guarantees is an individual's legal promise to repay a business debt if the business is unable to pay the expense or debt. Personal guarantee is basically a workaround for the whole LLC protection that I discussed earlier. So just be aware, if a landlord wants to include a personal guarantee, it's going to be hard to get around it. So just make sure that you can afford the lease, or your business can afford the lease, so that way you're not paying for it out of your own pocket. And then finally, employment and contractor agreements. So I did add contractor in this slide. It's very important to make sure, if you are an employee or a contractor for somebody else, make sure that I highly recommend that you have an attorney review these for you. If you're bringing on employees, I definitely recommend that you have a contract for them to sign, or at least an employee handbook. In my experience, employees can be the best thing until they're the worst thing. So it's good to have these in place. Employment contract generally sets forth the employee's duties and responsibilities. Again, very kind of obvious, but easily overlooked. Employee's compensation. Whether the employee is an at-will employee, meaning that they can quit at any time and you can fire them at any time. And if they are not at will, how they can be terminated or how they can leave the business. Assignment of employees intellectual property, basically meaning any kind of intellectual property they generate while working for your business, you own it. So that the intellectual property term is assignment. So if they're making like content for blog posts or things like that, you want to make sure that your business owns it at the end of the day. Non-competition, non-solicitation, and really trade secret protection all kind of fall into the same vein. There are usually laws. Well, let me back up. So non-competition means that they could not open a similar business in the same geographic area and compete with your business. Non-solicitation means that they cannot contact your other employees or your clients and try and get business from them, or have them, become an employee of their business. And then trade secret protection is basically they can't take your book of business, it's like client lists, for example, content that you've created, systems that you've created. And all these are pretty huge. In a lot of cases, there are state laws that protect you from these kinds of actions. But unfortunately, a lot of times the state laws say that if you were not proactive about enforcing the non-competition or non-solicitation or trade secret protection, then the state laws will not apply or only give you limited protection. And the best way to be proactive about it, and really what a court wants to see, is that you had a contract in place saying that they're not allowed to compete with your business, they're not allowed to solicit your employees and clients, and they're not allowed to take your trade secrets. So, big takeaway here. You should probably always have a business law attorney review your contracts. Contracts are dry. I've seen, I've had a lot of clients who say, hey, I wrote this great contract. I just need you to take a look at it. I think it's pretty good though. And I look at it and it's missing a lot, yeah. So just make sure you engage an attorney for your contracts. I think the most important one on this list would be making sure you have a good services agreement to show your clients. I think that is very important and can avoid a lot of disputes. And then if you hire employees, they should be signing a contract as well. So those are probably the top priorities. So yeah, that's my section on contracts. Any questions for me there?
Yeah, I have a question.
Oh yeah, let me expand my screen here, or my so I can see everybody. Yeah, go ahead.
So if a practice is not licensable, like hypnotherapy or hypnosis is not licensable in Oregon, does that mean also that there's no such thing as malpractice for that? Insurance? I've been trying to figure
Yeah,
that
so that's a good question. That's another good question to go back. Yeah, that's another good question to go to an insurance broker.
Okay.
And yeah, the best thing I can tell you there is to try and reach out to an insurance broker. And I like them because they, in my experience, I have some good insurance brokers I've worked with, and they're really looking out for the best interest of your business if you find a good small business broker. I have a feeling they always seem to be able to get some kind of insurance in place. There's always something that exists, but it does look different depending on the industry.
Okay. So other people here, I mean, in Oregon, is there malpractice insurance that you've come across for hypnosis or hypnotherapy?
Tell her about yours. No, go ahead. I don't know what it is. Oh, you don't know what it is? I have my phone here.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead, tell them a little bit.
Well, we have somebody we're lining up, Darlene and I, through Rivermark Bank, who recommended her. So we have a name here if anybody's interested. Okay, one moment. We're pulling that out.
Yeah.
And I also know I know a Washington-based broker. So if it comes up, I may be able to track somebody down for you. And I tend to have a fair amount of small business connections, so I may be able to find somebody in Oregon as well who could help you out with that. But you go ahead, Darlene. I didn't want to cut you off.
Okay, well, I'm Lanita, I'm on Darlene's machine, so
Oh, I got you.
that's fine. But what we could do is maybe just email that out to everybody once we have it.
That
Yeah.
would be great. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I hope I'm inspiring some of these conversations about liability protection, because that's really what I'm hoping to do is just make sure everybody's thinking about the right things from a legal perspective, which I think, a lot of business owners I don't think want to think about it. So yeah, but I'm glad that's what we're doing.
Well, it's important to be protected, so, yeah.
Definitely. Okay, well, I think I might be kind of running out of time, but so if we have any other questions, I'm not in any hurry though, so I'm happy to go over if that's okay. I'll let Tish and everybody else kind of guide me here, but my next section here is intellectual property, which is really what Tish contacted me to talk about. So yeah, I think there's gonna be a lot of good stuff there.
I have a question before you move on.
Mhm.
Is an intake form,
Yeah, that remark.
therapy intake form a contract? Sorry.
Very Hebert, and I have her.
I would say no. If you're using it as a contract,
No, I'm not.
probably shouldn't. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, no, a contract should set forth some very clear language, saying at some point the parties agree to the following.
Right. So it could be included with the service agreement, could it?
Yeah, you could put it as attach it as an addendum. A lot of times contracts will have attachments to them that let you add that kind of language. My advice there, though, would be to separate them out as much as possible. Say, I'm sending you your contract and I'm sending you an intake form. Please take care of both and get it back to me so I can, begin working with you.
Okay. And I would honor the last meeting we had, it came up, concern came up with how long does an intake form need to be and how concise. And so maybe Jean or Kat can speak to that at some point when it's Jean's turn. I don't know. I've been kind of waiting because there are many different styles of intake forms. So anyway, thank you, Brett.
Yeah, of course, of course. And I know sometimes I've worked with some naturopaths who have a lot of forms that they have to send out. That's largely kind of the medical industry itself. You gotta sign the regular agreement. You got to sign the what's the word for it? The virtual healthcare consent form. You got to do the intake. You got to do the blood work consent form. Those kinds of things. So some industries it does get very kind of difficult, or a lot of contracts are kind of piled up on top of each other, or at least a lot of forms, some of which are contracts.
Hey, Brett, do you mind if I add something? My name is Kat Wilson, and I have a training center in Portland, Oregon. Some of the
Mhm.
people are asking questions about things that we would be doing in different states. One thing, I'm on a committee, and it's a
Mhm.
steering committee to watch legislative action in Oregon. And
Mhm.
I've been involved with this committee for a very long time, and we meet monthly. One of the things that has come up that's really important, and I don't know if this applies to Washington, but if you're doing hypnotherapy and you're already licensed as a medical professional, then your medical professional license is what is really going to hold a lot of the should I do this or should I do this. If you're offering hypnotherapy service, you're in Oregon, you're legally responsible to your whole licensure. So, in other words, if somebody is a licensed psychologist and they decide, yeah, I don't want to be a psychologist, I just want to do hypnotherapy, you're actually in Oregon, you have to be following the rule of law for being a psychologist because it goes up to the highest level. So, it's just something that we've run into and something that we have found that you have to be very careful of. So, for instance, if a person was a medical professional, and I know that Lakshmi was talking about being a naturopath. Uh, I don't know what it is to go from the state where she is over to Oregon or in between states, but I do know here, if she wanted to do hypnotherapy, she would be regarded as the highest level of licensure that she holds, and that would determine the laws. And so the legislature has certain areas that define what they need to do. And that was a big part of our conversation when we've been writing the bill for Oregon. And I've been involved in 2 committees to write bills here. So it's something to think about if you're holding other degrees.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's awesome insight, Kat. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Um,
you.
and yeah, I think the good news, I think this is what you're saying, but correct me if my understanding is wrong here, because I'm only about 75% confident on this. But for example, if you're a naturopath, you don't need to have in Washington, I'm pretty sure this is the case, you don't need to have a separate therapy license, hypnotherapy license. So I think you are, while, treeing up could be a good and a bad thing, but I think it does cover a lot of kind of subclasses if you do have a kind of higher certification to provide or a license to provide those kinds of services.
Okay.
Now here's a thought for you, Brett.
Mhm.
So in Washington, it's required to register as a hypnotherapist. And I'm familiar because my students come from Washington as well as Oregon. So what happens if, and we have lawyers who become hypnotherapists, actually pretty popular.
Really
We had
interesting.
a fantastic hypnotherapist who's not here anymore, but his name was Jeffrey Knight, and he was an attorney, and he was a wonderful hypnotherapist. So I wonder what happens if an attorney from Washington wants to become a hypnotherapist. I mean, just because you get, you're thinking, wow, this is fascinating stuff. I love this, and this is a great service. So I wonder what you would have to do um, in watching legally if you decided to say, yeah, I don't want to be a lawyer. I just want to do hypnotherapy.
Yeah. I think in my case, I don't think any of my training would help me get a license at all.
Well, I mean, you would have
maybe,
to be trained, but I'm just
yeah,
curious about the legality of that.
yeah. Well, so I know there are certain education and practical experience and training requirements. So I think I would probably be starting from almost square one, unless the unless having a bachelor's degree, helps me kind of check off the first box. I don't even know if my JD is gonna is gonna help me at all on that front. So I think I'd have a lot of work to do. But it would be interesting for sure. All right. So are we ready to move into intellectual property? Okay. So intellectual property, section 3. So I'm going to define at a high level, and sorry, this actually spent more time on the first topics than I thought I would, but so I'm going to try and get to this quickly for you. So intellectual property, it's just the broad term for this area of the law. Here's a quick definition for you there. But mainly what intellectual property covers is trademarks, copyrights, and patents. I think in your cases, you're probably not going to need any patents. I am also not able to practice patent law. For attorneys, they have to have studied engineering, math, science in college to practice patent law. So that's the only area of intellectual property that I cannot practice, unfortunately. And most attorneys do not study engineering in college, and I'll just tell you that much. So there's not many patent attorneys out there. So we'll start with trademarks. I actually think trademarks are probably more important for small businesses. So trademark is a symbol, word, or words legally registered or established by use as representing a company or product. So what does that mean in practice? What can you trademark? You can trademark a business name, such as Virgo Law. Business logo, there's my logo there. Business slogan, hardworking, creative, reliable, which also, fun fact, is just the first 3 Virgo traits that show up on Google when you Google Virgo traits. But I think they're accurate, so I like it. And I am a Virgo. And then also sub-brands. So if you offer service packages, I don't know, I'm not feeling creative on the spot. But one example, and I was going to bring this up in my case study, but it looks like we won't have time to go over it. But I do have a naturopath client who launched her own product line of herbal teas to kind of facilitate with the therapy process. And so she trademarked that brand. I actually don't even think she has a trademark for the actual business, but she does have a trademark for her herbal tea line now, which is cool, I think. So trademark basics, what do? They prove that you own your brand. They increase the goodwill and the value of your business, which is good if you're thinking about succession or selling at the end of the day, or when the time comes. Important thing to keep in mind here is you generally do not own a trademark until you file and are approved by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. There is a process where you can show that you were using a trademark first, but there are timelines that are pretty strict and it's very hard to catch. So for the most part, if you have a business that's name is not your name, you may want to consider getting a trademark sooner than later to go ahead and lock that name in. There are 2 types of trademarks you can get: federal and state trademarks. For the most part, you should get the federal trademark. It is easier to get state trademarks, and a state trademark will be accepted for reasons that a federal trademark might be denied. So strategically, if you're working with an attorney, state trademark might be the way to go, but in general, federal trademark is what you should be going for. Times when you should think about getting a trademark for your business. Ideally, from my perspective, I think you should start thinking about the trademark process from the moment you choose your business name. And a business attorney like myself will do a trademark search for you to make sure that the mark is not already taken. That doesn't involve a little bit of Googling. You can't do the Googling yourself, of course, but there's also a search process through the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office So it's good to at least know, hey, this name's available. Even if now is not the right time to file for the trademark, I know that it's not taken at the very least. Other major triggers for when you start thinking about getting a trademark. Let's say you invest in building a new website, or you invest in tools to improve your online presence, like paid advertising and search engine optimization. Really, if you just invest money into doing anything that builds your brand, you're probably going to want a trademark, because you'd hate to find out at the end of the day that you invested all this money and the brand's taken, or you get a cease and desist letter from somebody who does have a registered trademark. Another perk is if you do sell products online through retailers like Amazon, which my naturopath client does have some like hand fidgets that she likes to sell that are like affirmations. I don't think she sells hers through Amazon, but if you sell products on Amazon, your products get listed higher if you have a trademark. I think the same is true for Etsy, but each online retailer has different policies on that, but good thing to keep in mind. Who can file a trademark? You can file your own trademark. And then any attorney licensed in a US jurisdiction can file a trademark for you. That's a very important distinction, because if you file for a trademark and it's not you and it's not a US attorney, or attorney licensed in the US, then that trademark will get denied just because the applicant wasn't the right person. And there was actually a recent problem with this, because there's these Chinese websites that were just mass filing trademarks for people. And I think it was because there are a lot of Amazon retailers, and the USPTO just denied hundreds of trademarks pretty much overnight once they found out who these websites were. So I would say make sure you have an attorney that you can speak to on the phone who can verify that they do have a bar license before you file a trademark. Otherwise, it doesn't even matter if you own the mark, it's going to get denied. As I mentioned before, having an attorney do it for you. An attorney should do a comprehensive search for you, so that way you know if it's taken or available beforehand. And then it's also easy to make some simple mistakes during the trademark application process. The USPTO does a good job of making it easy, but sometimes clients make mistakes, and sometimes that can cause a trademark to get denied altogether. Or right now I have a client whose trademark is being opposed by somebody else across the country who's using the same mark. And the main reason this opposition is even happening is because my client clicked the wrong button during her application, and I was already working with her at the time, so I don't know why she came to me, but I guess lesson learned there. Trademark filing expectations cost $250 per class, and in most cases, a business only files a trademark for one class, but it gets a little tricky if you're selling multiple products or multiple different service lines. I think for services, probably less likely. So you're looking at about $250 filing fee, plus whatever an attorney charges. Takes about 9 months for the USPTO to review your trademark application, so it's a pretty long process. It's supposed to be 6 months. The USPTO is understaffed. Same old story post-COVID. So it's going to take a while for your trademark to be accepted. Some high-level reasons trademarks usually denied. Trademark is already taken by somebody else. Now the business proves that they were using your mark, your mark before you. That's called an opposition. That's super rare. Usually if they're using it and they care, then they're just going to file their own trademark, so you'd be able to see it beforehand. And then your mark is what is called descriptive, which is a legal term used by the USPTO. So an example of a descriptive term would be Harris Hypnotherapy. They're going to say this is descriptive because your last name is Harris and you provide hypnotherapy services. There's nothing unique, or it's not unique enough. Another example would be Oregon Hypnotherapy. Geographic terms are also considered descriptive for the most part. There is a way to work around this. The main way to do that is file a trademark with your state and have that trademark be active for 5 years. And then once it's active for 5 years, it's considered distinctive not to be confused with descriptive, which I do all the time. And once it's distinctive, the USPTO will accept your trademark for the most part. So, and then protecting your trademarks. First step, file for the federal trademark protection. It's essentially not protected until that happens. Put the trademark symbol, this little R logo, next to your trademark after the mark has been approved. However, you cannot do that before your trademark is approved by the USPTO, so don't do it before it's approved. And then contact an attorney if someone else is using your trademark. If I get a phone call like this, first step is always send a demand letter, see if we can get them agree to not use it, scare them out of it a little bit maybe. If that doesn't work, then there might be options to escalate it, depending on if you want to fight it, which you should. Trademarks are very important for your business's goodwill. All right, and then the other bigger topic is copyrights, which I think is what Tish really wanted me to talk about today. But I think for a small business, copyrights are important, but I haven't found a lot of people or clients that it's really worth the financial investment to file for a copyright, and I'll explain why that is here in the next slide. But copyright definition is bundle of exclusive rights granted to an author of a creative work, such as a book, movie, song, painting, photograph, design, computer software, architecture. It really can be anything creative. It's hard for me to guess. Every time I think I've seen it all or thought of everything, I get something else crazy. Example right now is I have a client who designs and sells these very interesting, I would consider maybe like explicit trophies. She just sells trophies. She's got a good trophy business, but she makes these very unique designs. And so now I'm filing a bunch of trophy copyrights. So anything that's kind of a creative work. The 4 things you need to look out for to know if something is copyrightable is it a work of authorship? Unless a computer did it, it's going to be a work of authorship. Is it original? Is it on a fixed tangible medium of expression? And what that means, and this is probably the biggest problem I run into with clients who think they want to copyright something, is you can't copyright an idea. It has to be an actual fixed tangible medium of expression, I guess is a great way to put it. So you can't copyright the idea of, the next great fantasy book to rival Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings, but you can copyright the book once it's written, and I guess until then, just don't tell anybody about it. And then it must be minimally creative. So that means the bar is pretty low. As long as there's some kind of creativity involved, you can kind of borrow from other things that already exist. Copyright basics. The big thing with the copyright is that copyright protection exists with creation. So as soon as you create a copyrightable work, the copyright exists for that work. That's why a lot of my clients don't usually decide that it's worth filing for a federal copyright, because they can already enforce some rights on it, and they rarely have a single product or creative work that is doing well enough to protect it above all else. If that is the case, you may want to think about getting one. The main benefit of federal copyright registration is that it allows you to sue for copyright infringement, and you can get some extra damages. So unfortunately, even though you can prove that you own a copyright to something without filing for a federal copyright, it's kind of hard to enforce without the copyright infringement. Of course, same as trademarks. If somebody tries to steal your copyright, first thing you should do is contact an attorney like me. I'll send a demand letter, and usually that's enough to get them to stop using it, but not always. Tips about using other people's copyrights. It's really a case-by-case situation, but I think with small businesses, the biggest thing is just ask for permission if possible. Be a good person, and then give credit to the source. I just recently wrote an article for a friend of mine who's a financial advisor, and so he's going to post the article on his company's website. I'm also going to take the article, post on my website. It's technically my copyright, probably, you know, the best thing for me with this article is for him to have it on his website because it just increases my exposure. So, you know, as long as he's giving me credit, I'm not going to be worried about it. And I would imagine probably largely the same situation in the hypnotherapy community or general therapy community. So, but if you have a more specific question on whether you can use someone's copyright, feel free to let me know. I don't think we need to go through this. Again, I just want to emphasize copyright assignment's very important. So if you have an employee, just make sure that you have a clause in your agreement that says that they will give you their rights to any creative work that they generate while working for you. The reason I put my formation guide on this slide again is because I hired some contractors from Fiverr to make this look nice for me. I don't have those skills. When I sent it to them, it was just a Word document, looked terrible. But they made it look nice for me. But good thing about Fiverr is in the terms of service, there's an automatic assignment clause where any work that a Fiverr contractor does for you, they will assign to you. Licenses, on the other hand, are buying, you know, the rights to use somebody else's copyright. So you probably have a ton of licenses around you all day. For example, I'm using PowerPoint to give this presentation. I have a limited license from Microsoft to use this PowerPoint. So if you have something that somebody wants to use, copyrighted work, you may be able to license it to them. Alternatively, you may be able to buy it from them or rent it from them essentially through a license. Copyright compilations, this kind of goes with the when you can use other people's work. So copyright compilation is a collection of copyrighted work organized into another creative work. Classic example that I would hear in law school from my professors is, well, let me step back here. So a compilation must be minimally creative. And this is the example of what that means. So Shakespeare works organized by Shakespeare's use of vowels, you know, throughout his life. Great, you know, you can make that that'd be a good protectable collection of works. Shakespeare works organized chronologically or alphabetically. That would not be good. You're just taking the other person's copyright at that time or in that situation. What I think about a lot with this is I remember when I was in college studying history, the professors would frequently, you know, have you buy course books from the local bookshop. And I was always like, how can they just take chapters out of some of these very well-known history books and just put them in these course packets and nobody's getting in trouble for this? You know, the university's not getting sued. What's going on here? I learned probably like 6 or 7 years later, it's probably would be considered compilation under copyright law, you know, because they are, you know, creating a survey of the Russian Revolution by borrowing works from other authors, you know, and so it's a very different work than what was originally created. So protecting your copyrights, first thing is put a copyright notice on all of your original works. Did any of you notice the copyright notice on my PowerPoint here? We got Lakshmi's shaking her head. I can't see everybody, but there it is. So obviously, I just worked on this PowerPoint last week. I hope it was great for you guys, but I did not have time to file for federal copyright protection. So, but it doesn't matter. I still have my notice down here. That's me telling the world that it's mine. You can't have it. And if you do have it, then we will fight over this. Another step for protecting your copyrights is to apply for federal copyright protection with the U.S. Copyright Office. And then if somebody takes it, an attorney can send a demand letter for you, or you can do a takedown notice, DMCA takedown notice, which I will cover here briefly. But first, I want to really hit home this point of the copyright notice. Anything creative that you make, you write a book, you write a blog post, make a PowerPoint like I'm doing today, anything like that, make sure you include the copyright notice. Basic copyright notice looks like this. You know, you got the classic copyright symbol. You can do that, parentheses, C, parentheses, year of publication and the owner's name. So in this case, just so it's bigger for everybody, got the copyright symbol 2022 Virgo Law LLC. And The U.S. Copyright Office has really good guidance on these. Not everything, of course, needs the same kind of notice. For example, a podcast. You're not going to be able to do this with a podcast, probably. So they have guidelines for how you can address copyright notices for other sorts of mediums that are not covered. That this will not work for. And then finally, what is a DMCA takedown notice? In my experience, I've worked with a couple clients who need this for blog posts. They have somebody, great at generating content for blogs for their website, but they find out another website's been stealing them. And what this act provides for is that a copyright owner can request that an internet service provider like Google, WordPress, you name it. Anyway, you request that they take down the infringing material. The benefit for the internet service provider is that if they take it down, they can't be sued for infringement, so they don't have to worry about any liability. For the most part, Google is very proactive about if they receive a notice, and they will take something like that down very quickly. A lot of internet service providers are good on that. Sometimes it backfires because I have seen this used maliciously, where somebody else claims that the original copyright owner is infringing on their material, and all of a sudden their content gets taken down. That does get a little more complicated, but usually you can contact the internet service provider and resolve it, or that's something that I can also help with. So that's intellectual property really quick for everyone here. I did have this case study, but I don't think we have time to go over it, but I think that's all right. So yeah, feel free to ask me questions about copyright. And then just to wrap up, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak here. Really had a great time. Sorry for going a little bit over. If you'd like to reach out to me for any questions, I generally do not charge for questions unless I have to do substantial research on them. But if you'd like to reach out to me, best ways to contact me are my email here. I think you have it on my handout as well. Or if you go directly to my website, there's a little box you can fill out the bottom of the website to get a hold of me. Yeah, and I think that's everything. I'd love to work with each and every one of you if you think if I can be a benefit to your business. And of course, I'm not selective about the businesses I work with. I work with, businesses ranging from coffee shops to healthcare providers to industrial suppliers. So I really range the spectrum here.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
It's very informative, and I will be in touch. I'm thinking about moving to Washington State, but not sure yet whether I will be doing that. So, but I will be looking into the Washington requirements as well. So.
Okay, great,
Thanks,
great,
yeah.
good to know. Yeah, I'd love to help you navigate those.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then if we have any time too, I'd love to answer questions about, intellectual property. If you have any, I'm sorry to run through that section quickly, especially because I think that was what you were most interested in. But I think we covered everything that situations I can imagine your businesses are likely to run into.
Wonderful. Well, it's my honor to introduce our next speaker, which we know is Jean Cassidy. And the wonderful thing about Jean is she has over 40 years of experience teaching and tutoring people. She teaches math, and she works with adults. She works with teens and children, both individually as well as she volunteers in the public school system. As you may know, Jean is a board member and is our treasurer, and runs her business, which is called Artful Living in Coos Bay, where she offers hypnosis, personal coaching, and individualized tutoring service. So without further ado, we are so lucky. Thank you, Jean, for presenting for us today.
Thank you, Scott, and everybody for being here. I was going to ask you, Glenn, about pinning, and I guess you just did it. So thank you all for being here at the Oregon Hypnotherapy Association 2022 fall event and for my presentation. Hey, that was really a great presentation that Brett did, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think so. I was amazed. Actually, I didn't know that I would be so interested in the things he had to share, but I found most of what he had to say was really relevant and informed me and has kind of changed how I'm thinking about myself as a business person. So I really appreciate that. And thank you, Scott, for the lovely introduction. And I'm curious, how many people here have some training with NLP? All right, I'm going to just scroll. Okay, so we've got a variety here, which is what I expected. And there's a learning style thing I want to ask about, because when I'm in the classroom, I've got the board and I'm there personally and I can see everybody. So there's this kind of there's all this information going on at once. And some people really like to look at what's on the board, like they want to see those notes. And some people really want to see the person. And the way I've prepared things, I've got a lot of slides and I kind of want to do a poll and see if that's okay with folks. Like I'll pop in, but is that okay with folks? You can speak up too. Right? Anybody can unmute. I'm seeing some thumbs up. Slides are okay?
Yeah, we're doing good.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And thank you for the chat, Kat. All right. So another thing is that people have questions. Sometimes I make a mistake and you need to correct me. Notice I said you need to correct me when I make a mistake. And you can always ask for clarification. I see education as an interactive process. And then also another thing is that I was going to mark out all the NLP concepts in my slides. And then I realized that there are so many of them. And I guess I should say NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and it's kind of a spin-off from Milton Erickson and Virginia Satir's work with family therapy systems that then grew into this amazing body of modeling excellence and communication. So I realized, though, that if I tried to highlight or gold star all of those, there'd be gold stars all over the place. So I feel like this is the beginning of a conversation and the beginning of more presentations than this, that if people are interested, I will share more. So I'm going to pop into screen share. And if there's something you need, like if something isn't clear, there's something you need, let me know. And so how does that look? Can you see that? Thumbs up.
Looks great.
Thanks. Okay, so what we're going to do, so this is my talk, A Teacher's Journey with NLP. I think I'm going to figure out how to make this smaller. I'm working on just with one laptop screen, and I'm used to two big screens, so it's a little odd. Okay, I think I'm ready. So, goals. Today we're going to explore limiting beliefs, context, meta outcomes, And then what I hope you get is an increased awareness of context, a little taste of NLP that maybe will get you wanting more if you haven't done much. And of course, enjoyment. As long as you're here, I'm always into enjoying whatever I'm doing. So I always wish that for other people. Okay. So the path that we're going to take, taking limiting beliefs, transforming to empowering beliefs. We're going to talk about context and creating a context based on values, which means we're going to need to look at values. Then we're going to talk about outcomes for the classroom and meta outcomes, which are the higher level outcomes that I wanted to achieve with my students. And then how we implement and support the meta outcomes. And then we'll have time for some questions, discussion, and sharing. And of course, you can also ask questions. Again, questions, corrections, or clarifications during the presentation. And Scott, are you willing to field anything that, because I'm not seeing anybody's hands right now the way I've, are you willing to facilitate anybody's questions or comments?
Oh, you bet.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So I'm going to start with a brief story. I was a great math tutor. And so that I thought that teaching was going to be kind of a piece of cake. I'd do the work, of course, make my lecture notes and do all those things that all those other teachers that I had seen, I saw what they did and walk into the classroom and I'd get this great result. And that's not what happened. Students were very distracted. I didn't see them having particularly good study habits. And I was concerned about that. And I asked the other teachers about their experience, the other math teachers. And they said they thought it was really typical, the football players sitting in the back row, chatting with each other, somebody reading a novel, people generally being distracted. And I'm talking about a calculus class, not algebra class. So, you think in calculus class, people are going to be paying attention, but they weren't. And that's okay. It wasn't okay then. I was really upset about it. But I figured out they had limiting beliefs. A limiting belief is a belief or a decision we make about ourselves and or our model of the world that limits or restricts us in some way. And they had lots of limiting beliefs, my students, but here's just some examples. Making mistakes is bad. There's a right way to do math, and the teacher is responsible for the learning. The problem with our limiting beliefs is that we think they're facts. But the good thing about limiting beliefs is that when we identify them, then we have the opportunity to change them. Beliefs are not right or wrong, but they can be either more empowering or less empowering in a given context or situation. So I encountered these, and I don't know if you'd like me to pop out, like I can pop out and look at you for a moment and then pop back in. I observed from the position of teacher that my students had these limiting beliefs. And I said, okay, I've got to change these. So I said, okay, I'll change them. And I identified them and I changed them. So I said, oh, I got to share. I'll get better with practice. There we go. So I said, all right, what am I going to change? Making mistakes is bad. What do I want to change that to? Anybody, what's something we might want to change? Making mistakes is bad too.
Opportunities to grow.
Yeah,
Reach-
making mistakes are opportunities to grow. Yeah, and what about there's a right way to do math?
Many ways.
Yeah, there's many ways that will work, that are effective. And what about the teacher is responsible for the learning?
We both are. We're a partnership.
Yeah, okay. It's a partnership.
Mhm.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Okay. I think I have to pop out of annotate to go to the next. Let's see. Oh, maybe I have to do that. So, ooh, see what I did there with the words are showing up. So I need to go back. This is everything is an opportunity to learn. Oh, gee, how do I undo that? Annotate. Undo. Oh, that's kind of crappy, isn't it? Select, delete. I don't know what to do about that one. Okay, we're just going to go with it. There's going to be some background, unless somebody knows the workaround for this. When you've done this, clear.
Yeah, I'm not. Oh, good.
Yeah, you click on more on the annotate thing, and then it says clear all drawings. So no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it, said Albert Einstein. So, I figured out these empowering beliefs. I went back into class and I said, hey, mistakes are an opportunity to learn. And that didn't change what my students were doing. And I said, hey, this is a partnership. And that didn't change. That didn't change my students' beliefs. Now, as people, you're all here connected with the Oregon Hypnotherapy Association, you're probably smiling about that. But back then, when I was a beginning teacher, I thought that I could just tell them something and that it would change their belief, but it didn't. So I had to go to another level of consciousness about this. And I was very fortunate because I had a new friend, Ben. He's on this presentation today, and he has extensive experience in NLP. And he would just talk to me about things, just have conversations. And how I started looking at the issues I was finding in the classroom started transforming. So this was all going on in the background as I was continuing to teach. So I said to myself, my goodness, you mean they don't know that teachers have my students don't know that I have their best interest at heart? They don't know that I have wisdom, I'm successful. Their worldview must be different than my worldview. So I wonder what their worldview is. So I thought about that. And their worldviews live inside of a context, a big framework. And I said, well, in general, what is it? And our culture values entertainers and athletes more than education. Media and advertising shows success as something that is external and often material. And I've also been thinking in the past week about, since 1776 in the United States, we've had 250 years of social transformation. A lot of the countries that immigrants came to the United States from were monarchies with a very hierarchical system, and we didn't create a monarchy. We created, something like a democracy, and I'm not going to go into the details of the transformation. But the point is, now there are all kinds of people who say, no, I'm not going to respect you just because you're the teacher. I'm not going to respect you just because you're older than I am. Respect must be earned. So there's been a shift in hierarchical systems. And when I was a freshman in college, I walked in and I respected the teacher automatically by position. But 10 years later, when my first freshman students were walking into class, it's not that they didn't respect me. It's just that it was a different thing. It had to be earned. So then I said, okay, that's the context. So if that's the context, what do I believe? What do I value? And so I thought about this and I said, what do I believe? And it's this list of bullets. And they are my personal beliefs and values about inclusiveness. Everyone can learn math. Everyone deserves to be treated respectfully and fairly. Each person wants to express themselves and to be valued. Each person wants compassion and understanding. Each person wants to be recognized for their efforts and accomplishments. Group learning is most effective when it is collaborative and everyone can contribute. So there you go, Tish. And even though there are roles, each person is important to the successful outcome. So the educational system was changing. Decades ago, the model was the teacher has the knowledge and gives it to the students. But the classroom changed, the culture changed. And so I thought, okay, how can I use this as a framework to create a context for what I do in the math class? Now, I'm still going to teach math. Okay, all that's going to happen. But the question is, what's the interaction going to be like? And how am I going to make that happen? Because if I just tell the students, they don't just believe me. I've actually got to demonstrate it. I've actually got to let them have the experience that these beliefs and values that I have actually can be true for them and their experience. So, outcomes and meta outcomes. An outcome is just a result we want. In math class, it's the knowledge, skills, abilities, and understandings. We want that student to be able to do that math. And in our work with our clients, it's the results that our client wants. Like, I want to be able to sleep through the night, have a good night's sleep. That's the outcome. Meta, the word or the prefix meta, means beyond, more comprehensive, transcending, more encompassing, understanding something from a larger frame of reference instead of from within the frame. So if we put meta in front of outcome, we get meta outcomes, and that is just a bigger picture outcome or goal. And that's definitely part of NLP. Beliefs, values, all of this is, we talk about this in NLP. So outcomes for a math class, we want the student to be successful in the course. We want them to be prepared for other courses, and we want them to be prepared to be successful in their profession, like whatever math I teach, whatever they learn, I hope that goes with them. But I want more than that. I have outcomes that will empower students in all areas of those lives. And that list of values and beliefs that I showed a few slides ago is that list. Those are the meta outcomes, or those frame the meta outcomes that are here. So this is where I said to myself, what do I actually want my students to get from class? All the students. They are already good at many things. They have value. Reframing their mistakes to be an opportunity for learning. I wanted them to ask questions, make observations, and for us to work together. I wanted them to have the experience that we could all be nice with each other. Compassion, encouragement, and acknowledgement for everyone. Learning their own learning styles. I would tell them, do you think I care if you remember this equation 2 years from now? I don't care about that. I want you to learn how your own brain and learning works, because you're unique and you're going to have that brain and it's going to be growing and developing. Your knowledge is going to be deepening, but you have your own style. And that's a gift. I wanted them to be believing that they're good enough and smart enough for whatever they want. I want them to believe in themselves, their dreams, and their passions. So, of course, my colleagues thought I was a bit nutty. By the way, is this pacing effective for people? Just doing this, having a look. Is it a thumbs up? Okay. Right, because I can't see you when I'm looking at these two other things, and I'm really used to feedback, visual feedback. And
The feedback from here, really great. Great pacing. Awesome job.
And thanks for the thumbs up, Michelle. Okay, so back. Oh, it's this thing again. I've got to do this screen share. I've been using Zoom for 3 years, and you think I'd be good at it. Well, I am better. So thank you for that feedback. Oh. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to pop back up. How do I get these meta outcomes? My goodness. Nobody taught me how to do this. I didn't learn this in school. My mother didn't tell me, but how did she convey that? How did my different mentors let me have these meta outcomes? So this is the point. How do we implement them? Well, what I learned is how we implement them depends upon the meta outcome. And sometimes it's useful to use more than one, particularly, well, definitely with a group of people. Each person is an individual. So just using one way is really lame when you've got a group of individuals. But also, as all of us here know, it's really useful to deliver, to package an idea in different ways. It's just good for the subconscious and the conscious mind. So one thing is speaking it. So one of the things I would do in the first day of class, I would say, so you already think I'm the expert. Like, I'm the expert, right? I'm the teacher here. And they'd say, yeah. And I'd say, so maybe I'm the smartest person in the room. And somebody would say, yeah. And somebody would say, maybe. And then I'd say, okay, so I bet there's somebody in this room that's really good at something that I'm not very good at all. Does somebody want to just share with the class something they're really good at? And then the person would share about that thing. And often it was something, like, I am a really great quarterback on the football team. And I'd let them talk about it. I'd say, wow, you are definitely an expert compared to me. Thank you. You have expertise. So that's just a thing of just like inviting it, speaking it kind of directly, picking a meta outcome and creating a question or something in the conversation to bring that up. Another one is to tell a story. So I've got this really fantastic, story about reframing mistakes as learning opportunities. And I've told this in class many times. And I've even had students come back years later and tell me that this story made a difference for them. I was 19 years old, and I think it was the second time I had downhill skied in my life. And I was coming down the hill. I was with my boyfriend and my brother were with me on the ski trip. It was in Iowa. It was not a very big hill, but I was coming down, and I knew I was going to wipe out. So I just closed my eyes. And of course, I wiped out because I was downhill skiing with my eyes closed. Like, it's like, boom, wipe out. So I got up and skied to the bottom of the hill, and my brother and my boyfriend were there. My brother said, well, what happened? And I said, why, I wiped out. He said, yeah, that's obvious, but like, what happened to make you wipe out? And I said, I don't know. It was so fast. I knew I was going to wipe out. So I just closed my eyes. And my brother said, well, that's kind of stupid. How are you going to know what happened if your eyes were closed? Don't close your eyes next time. And so we got on the ski lift, and we went up and we're at the top, and they were more experienced and had longer skis. So you experienced skiers know that they were faster going down the hill. So I was behind them, and all of a sudden I knew I was going to wipe out. And I looked down and I saw that the right tip of my ski was going over my left tip. Right. So would know what happened if I closed my eyes. So, but I didn't. I picked up the ski and I put it parallel to the other ski. And then I just continued to go down that little ski hill. And that was really powerful. And I was also in college at the time. And of course, I was also taking math. And so I got back, normally I would get back a math quiz. And if it wasn't 100%, I'd be pretty annoyed. Like, oh no, I got a 92. What did I screw up on this time? And I'd put the paper away. But I got a quiz back and I looked at it and I said, what did I do here? Oh, okay, I got this part right. Oh, this is where I made the mistake. And I turned it into a learning opportunity. So that skiing story taught me to look at mistakes, quote unquote, in my life, to say, what am I getting right? What did I actually know? And where is it that I need to do some more work to figure it out? And that was just a little thing. So that is one of my stories. And of course, I'll tell that during class time. And I think that that's worth class time. And other teachers would think that I would waste my time, telling stories to students. But we all know better, right? Okay. Utilization. Utilization, I think made pretty famous by Milton Erickson, just means use what you are given. So the opportunities for utilization are everywhere. And if you just keep reminding yourself from time to time, maybe once a week, once a couple weeks, of what the meta outcomes are that you want to achieve, you'll start to see, and Brett, this is a suggestion, you'll start to observe that there are opportunities that you can utilize to get the meta outcomes. So for example, and I'm just going to pick one because they're all over the place. Someone might be a class clown and do a lot of cutting up and laughing and making the other students laugh. And in the past, I might have been annoyed at that, and I might have thought that that was disruptive. But in the context of people are always doing the best they can, and that every behavior is useful in some situations, in some contexts, which those are NLP things, I chose to think of that as, how can I give this young man positive attention and value him, right? This is part of valuing him. Also creating community. And what I said the first time I realized this was, you are so good at getting people to laugh and smile in my class, in our class. Thank you. It's wonderful. You're really good at that. So I valued him. I acknowledged him for his contribution. And I made it about us. And that also helps reframe what a math class is, because most people don't really like math class very much. Okay, so the next item is let's pretend. And that's also called the as if frame in NLP. Frame meaning framework. Let's pretend. So sometimes a student would say something like, okay, I'll make something up. That's real, of course. Gene, I just don't know how to do this math. I know I should be doing homework. I open the book and I look at it, and it's all this stuff. And none of it really makes sense to me. And, I'm not a math person. And I really do want to be successful in this class because I want to be a biologist. But I don't know, calculus is kind of kicking my butt. And then I might say, okay, so do you have a friend that's good at studying calculus? And if they do, then I might say, well, what do they do? Right? That's a utilization thing. But if they don't, I might say, let's pretend if you were a really good math student, what kind of things would you do? Or if that's too personal, I might say, let's pretend this person sitting next to you is a really good math person, quote unquote math person. How are they successful? What can you imagine this really successful math person doing? And I get them to talk about it. And then when they talk about it, they know what to do. By the way, I apologize for going so fast in the beginning. I like there to be more time to think about things. So let's pretend is really awesome. Affirming the meta outcomes. I alluded to this earlier. Remind yourself. It can be formally where you have a list and you look at it, or it could just be pondering and saying, yeah, what are those things I really want my clients to get? In the bigger picture, right? We want our clients to be capable. Of course, they're going to have things that are going to pop up in their lives. We want them to be resourceful. We might, these are my beliefs and values. And my meta outcomes, I want them to love themselves. I want them to appreciate themselves. I want them to appreciate the gifts and opportunities they have in their lives because they're there. And if you don't appreciate them, it's kind of like missing out on a good thing. So affirming the meta outcomes just puts that in your conscious and subconscious mind and helps you keep track and in alignment with your values, beliefs, and your identity, your higher purposes in life. Got to acknowledge Larry Dillenbeck. Thank you very much for that neurological level alignment presentation you did, I think, in 2017. You can see I use it. So what about you? What are your ideas about ways that we can achieve meta outcomes with our clients or our friends? I'm just curious. Anybody can unmute and speak, right?
I put down, be gentle with yourself. You are doing the best you can.
Be gentle with yourself. You are doing the best you can. I believe I'm writing this on paper. I guess I can write it on this and I can share it later with folks, right?
Absolutely.
So.
And know that whatever you do, you're doing the very best you can.
So, Kat.
Like, imagine you're doing that right now.
You mean me?
And everybody's absorbing it and they're feeling so good.
That's really sweet. Thank you, Kat. Does somebody else have something of how you get the meta outcomes? How you manifest those, help manifest those for people or yourself?
I love that imaginative process, as if, or imagine, what if you did know, opening up their subconscious mind rather than conscious processing.
I think it is important to use what we are given or what we happen to have on hand, because you really can't do anything else. You do have to work with what you have, where you are, and it's important to value that we have that and be grateful.
Thank you, Scott and Lenita. And I just have to pause a second. I'm still typing. Where you're at. Yeah. All right. Could you say that again, Lenita? You said you have to work with where you are.
Right. Because you can't work with what you don't have, or maybe where you'd like to be. And maybe that would set up some unrealistic expectations of being like somebody else. So really, that's all we do have is what we have to work with, and then be grateful that we have that, value it.
That's the part. Thank you.
Sort of baby steps and start where you are.
That's so loving.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and thank you, Scott, for the part that the let's pretend gets us to be imagining it, getting the unconscious mind involved. Yeah, and I didn't even know I was doing that. I was just absorbing that. Does somebody else have something they'd like to add to this?
Well, you're talking about modeling too. You know, you're being a model by modeling, by showing them the behavior that you value. And you're also modeling as you think about your brother, as you think about people in your life who have shown up as a teacher, you know, in ways that were helpful to you.
Yes, in fact, Michelle, that's the only way I knew what to do. I just thought, how did I get to love math? How did I get to trust teachers? How did I get to believe in myself? And it was all from people around me, right? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we're gonna jump to the next slide again.
I think Joseph has a question.
Oh, Joseph. Okay, thank you. Joseph.
Actually, it's a comment, but I was like thinking to myself, you're face to face with somebody that's challenging your meta outcome. And I realized that in science, for example, it's just a claim until you can challenge it. You have to challenge in science, you challenge everything. In order to make it worth anything, it has to be challenged. Your meta outcome is just words until you are faced with a challenge for it. So now I'm face to face with a challenge to my meta outcome. If I want the best for this student, they're challenging that. And what's more, I'm not the expert at that, they are. So not only am I faced with a challenge, but I'm also faced with the answer, or the person that can answer it for me. Now it's just a matter of turning loose my subconscious to come up with a strategy that works to get the answer for me, so I know how to behave in that environment. That just came to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have something to add to that. So Jean is, when this whole thing came up, we just dumped this into Jean's lap. And actually the original idea is, you know, like I wrote this down. How do we expand what we do to outside agents of change? How do we influence the influencers? And Jean goes, whoa. And so she sort of massaged this until she kind of got it down into a form that she knows and she's comfortable with. So there, with this whole, even this interpretation that Jean, the strategy that she's picked up, I could take this same thing and talk about something completely different, which is how do you work with classroom management? Mm-hmm. How do you work with kids who don't want to learn? Mm-hmm. How do you build a climate using language that builds this rapport, puts you back in the position of a leader? And so Jean is working with college students. I worked with everything from, well, I worked with middle school students at the end, but mostly elementary school kids. So you could take this a whole different thing. So we kind of have to let Jean do what she's doing. And, you know, she's got this thing all polished up. But remember, we could take this lots of different ways.
Well, thank you, Glenn. And
you're welcome.
In particular, in fact, when I was thinking about how I was going to take what I do and explain, you know, in the classroom and in my student interactions, which of course, there are a lot of similarities to what I do with my clients, I was thinking about it structurally. So the whole idea is that you can do this with your clients. You can do this in different contexts, this idea of saying, What are the limiting beliefs? How could they be empowered? Or you could just, maybe that's just to get a taste and to start thinking about what is the context of the people in this situation. What is their worldview? And then going to values. This really does follow the neurological levels of alignment in a certain way that Larry presented about. Going from those beliefs and values and then saying, you know, what do I want? Because the beliefs and values are going to frame what's going to be congruent, which means in alignment with yourself. Thinking about that first, then thinking about what you want to achieve within that context. And then it's a matter of figuring out how to do it. But these tools, you know, utilization, let's pretend, all these tools are useful. So thank you. That's yeah, I was fishing. To somebody else, and I caught some really good fish there. So does anybody else want to add something to this great list? For now? Okay, we'll jump back into the slideshow. Okay, so thank you so much. I really do like it when people collaborate. So then I said to myself, what can I do to support the meta outcomes happening? And when I was teaching, I mean, there's the first part, which is prepare the physical, which, you know, would be my handouts and lecture materials, my space for clients, having the space be right, all the things physically. Then there's preparing yourself using a ritual. I suggest having a ritual. The goal is to put yourself in a desired state. And I guess I should just stop that for a minute. So in NLP, a state is, and somebody else can help me with the wording. A state is something that's internal, and a state will have a certain resources associated with it. So for instance, if I'm in the state of being compassionate, I might be more observant. I might be a better listener. So that state, if I'm in a state of being like, action, go get them, we're going to get this job done really quick. I might be more aware of my body or task oriented. Could you add something to that, Larry, please? I'm feeling.
Yes, well, so a state includes both physical, mental, and emotional components. And so it's kind of the picture of where you're at physically, mentally, and emotionally at any given time. And sometimes we're in a resourceful state where we have access to our, our strengths and competencies and things like that. Sometimes we're in an unresourceful state. And so helping to, in the context of teaching, helping to invite a resourceful state in the students or a learning state in the students can be really helpful to facilitate learning. Or it might be, if you're focused on a particular meta outcome, what state would be supportive or aligned with that particular meta outcome? And so then how do you invite an experience in the students to go into that state? And you've already listed several really good ways of doing that. So does that help?
Yeah, that was awesome. So, by the way, Larry teaches NLP. And even though I've already done it, I'm interested in studying with you too, Larry. So thank you. See how great he is at that? Awesome. Thank you. So, so I would have a thing, getting ready to walk into the math classroom, I might be thinking of, oh, do I have everything ready for my class this afternoon, right? My mind would be on other things, or I might have something in my personal life going on. And so part of my ritual, when I would be walking to class, I would walk, I would breathe deeply. I would think to myself, I'm here for them. When I walk into the classroom,
Right.
that's who I'm for. And if I had any issues, I would put the issues over to my left and a little bit down. Now, for me, that's spatially where I would put it. Everybody has where they can put things. If you don't know that already, I see some of you are nodding. So for me, I knew that if I put them over here and down, that those issues would still, those concerns would still be there when I was done with the math class, but I could be right here now with the students. And so I would do this on my way to class, from my office to class, every class, which of course is a whole set of anchoring things do. I mean, there's all kinds of NLP things in there. And I don't even know if I knew that I was using NLP and things I was reading from Milton Erickson. I was just doing it. Sneaky, right? Sneaky, that stuff. So I suggest that if you don't have a ritual, that you create one. And of course I have one for when I'm going to be working with my clients. Okay, so back to this. Oh yes, the ritual will also help support you with something called perceptual position, which is very similar to association and dissociation with your client. So someone asked me recently a question that made me think about when I walk into the office with a client, and sometimes they're sharing things that if that were happening in my life, I would be really pretty upset, maybe traumatized, not very resourceful. And so the question was, if I'm with the client and if I'm in rapport with them, how come I don't get that trauma or feel those challenges or experience those challenges? How can I be with them and not? And for me, I do a thing where, like, the client's here and I'm right here with them. So maybe I'm seeing what they're seeing and I'm hearing what they're saying. And my viewpoint, I'm stepping into a position that's very close to them, but I'm not stepping into their position and I'm not experiencing what they're experiencing, because that I wouldn't be being very resourceful in that case. In psychology, and I'm assuming psychiatry, I haven't studied those things. But I've heard the terms association and dissociation. So being associated, like with somebody, kind of connected, dissociated, separate. In NLP, we talk about three, they're called perceptual positions because they are positions from which we are perceiving, either internally or externally. But there's also a continuum. You can actually, if you think about a triangle with a position on each corner of the triangle, we're doing math. Okay. The three positions are self, like if you're experiencing something yourself, and then there's like self, then there's other. So like if I see or observe or hear or somehow sense or understand that you're experiencing that, then here's me and there's you. And then observer, maybe I should turn it this way. Observer, I'm putting, so it's self, other, an observer maybe at the top of the triangle, and the observer is seeing the whole thing. And it's much like the parts of speech. First person is I, second person is you, and third person is them, or he, she, it. But it's not just the 3 points. It's actually, you could think of it as like anywhere in the triangle. And you could, of course, right, because you could have a little bit of seeing something or experiencing. I'm saying seeing, but it's really more understanding and perceiving, experiencing, because they can be internal things as well. So playing around with that in NLP, NLP practitioner training, we play around with that. We play around with that. And as you play and learn how to change your perceptual position, you get new information. Okay, back to this. So be present and observe, ask questions, then listen and hear. There's a big one. Reassure the client or the student that they are normal and that they are doing great. As Lanita said, people are doing the best they can, right? And it kind of sets false expectations for a person to want to be somewhere they aren't, or have the resources in that moment that in that moment they don't. So wherever a client or student, whatever they're experiencing, it is normal because they're experiencing it. Whatever they're doing is great because they're doing it. And that's where they're at. Reframe your ideas about mistakes as being powerful opportunities. We all make mistakes. We all can do things that are maybe more elegant, maybe more resourceful. Sometimes it's responding or taking action. Sometimes it's by being quiet and observing. The point is that these are opportunities. Remember skiing. Look, notice if the tips of your skis are starting to cross. Take that opportunity. And then the other thing is to give yourself time for solutions to manifest, because it's all a process. Oh, and I'll just add another thing on. Oh, I could actually, I really like seeing everybody. So it's another excuse to stop the screen share. So this is a story that I'm just spontaneously putting in here. My brother is very proud to be a man. And he's the best man he can possibly be. And he takes it very seriously. And he's strong and he's capable and he's intelligent and he's graceful and he's perceptive. He's an amazing human being. And he injured himself, got a severely bruised spleen, and they wanted to remove it, and he didn't let them, the doctors. And he was wanting to do that physical labor stuff, and you'd be like, oh, it hurts. And what I invited him to do was I invited him to treat his own body with the tenderness and compassion and care that he would treat my body, because he loves me, right? If I was the one who was injured, I asked him to have that compassion and tenderness and care for himself. And I ask all of you to have compassion and tenderness and care and nurturing and joy and playfulness for you, because you're doing the best you can and you're growing and deepening, and which kind of brings us to our last, I think, 2 slides. So you can really see what I'm all about, right? I'm obvious. So most importantly, giving yourself permission and encouragement to keep learning, to be authentically you. Like, just because I do it this way doesn't mean you need to do it this way. You need to be you. And congruence, be and act in alignment with your values and your identity, and allow your values and your identity to deepen as you travel through your life. And then I love this great quote from Oscar Wilde: be yourself, everyone else is already taken. What a sense of humor. What a wise person. And so thank you for being here. I know that we know that Larry Dillenbeck teaches NLP, certifies NLP practitioners. This is his website, www.lightstudies.org. Reach out to Larry. And at this point, it's totally worth learning NLP. Totally. And I just want to open it up to anything anybody wants to share, including Larry, anything you'd want to share about, all of you, any. Thank you. Yeah, so just unmute, and I see Bella.
Yeah, Jean, I just want to say I just loved your presentation, your humanness, your enthusiasm. It was wonderful. You almost made me cry. I was just really taken by your compassion for everybody and everything. And I wish I would have had a teacher like you in math, because I was horrible in math. I ended up marrying, my first husband was a math teacher. But I just want to thank you so much for the presentation and your wonderful compassion and personality. I just loved it.
I'm so glad you're working in the adult world. I mean, I was with elementary, and I've just been deeply, joyfully chuckling here, just in the ingenuity of your engineering style brain, which isn't my brain, and how you've so concisely put all of this together. It's really brilliant. Thank you.
Jean, I would like to say thank you so much for all that you shared today. And I agree. I really enjoyed your enthusiasm and just radiating your light the way you do. But I would like to mention, for those of you who have not gone through NLP training or experienced it, I think it's a perfect complement to hypnotherapy. In fact, it's hard for me to separate them, because of course, so much of NLP was modeled from Milton Erickson, but NLP training can help you be a much more precise and effective hypnotherapist, and vice versa. So I think they're perfectly complementary modalities. And so I would highly encourage the folks here with us that if you haven't had NLP training, it would be a wonderful complement to your skill set.
And thank you. And fun. It's so much fun.
So I have taught everything except for high school. I mean, I've taught kindergarten all the way up to graduate students and higher education. And the one thing that I have always noticed of my fellow teachers, those teachers who are master teachers, is that they create this following. Their students love them. And that's the only trick you really need to do. If your students love you, then it becomes much easier. So I think that's what the takeaway from what Jean has presented here is, create that atmosphere, create that, and the kids will follow. The kids will follow. That's not easy because depending on, what grade levels you are in, you shift around. Every grade level is different. There's a huge difference between second graders and third graders. There's a huge difference between first graders, and you have to learn that. You have to, there's a certain point where in elementary school, oh, you're the teacher, you're it, and then all of a sudden you have to earn that trust. So that happens around fourth. It used to be fifth and sixth grade. It's kind of moved down a little bit. So yeah, and like I said, every master teacher I've ever run across, the kids are enthralled. Once it's like it covers everything. It covers everything. Once you get them in, it's like putting them in the palm of your hand.
Yeah.
Jean, I want to say I felt that you were teaching us your dance. And whenever you step into a ballroom, you're going to know if the person who is teaching is enjoying what they're doing. And I picked up that your heart is so into the intention that it is an invitation. It's a joy. And when somebody feels that joy, they feel pretty happy about it. They feel very excited because it looks like you're having fun. And who doesn't want to have fun? A teacher who gets up like you did today and competently and very comfortably offers all the insight and wants to include other people, like you kept on moving from the slide to the screen, which is a preference. I felt everyone kind of turning to you and saying, oh, she wants me here. It's nice. It's very nice. Thank you for being you. Thank you for your dance. Really appreciated this.
Thank you, Jean. And I work at PCC right now, and this is a really big thing going on in community colleges, is getting the equity and the playing field so that everybody feels welcome in the classrooms. There's a lot of work going on, which is really great that you're there at the forefront of it, because I've heard, not necessarily here in Oregon, but at other universities and other colleges, that there is a lot of pushback about that. And it's interesting to get a perspective of someone who says, this is the way it should be, which is great. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Kat. Thank you.
And of course, in NLP, we watch out for words like should.
I used to teach at Willamette University. I was on the faculty there for a year, and I was a mentor teacher, and I would meet with principals, and the principals would all talk about the different student teachers and that were under my wing. So occasionally you would get a student teacher placed with a mentor teacher who was really, really good, but nobody could figure out why. And the principals would say, it's just inside of her. I don't know how you would teach that. And I'm not sure that was true, but that's kind of what you're doing. It's just that it's hard to quantify. I don't know if you could, here's a lesson how to be like Jean, but I think there's a mental path there. Nevertheless, there's an attitude that comes with it. There's a magic there, if that makes sense to anybody except for me.
It does. I think NLP gives us, and hypnosis as well, gives us that avenue to be present enough to truly listen to truly understand and, like you say, step into that person's point of view. When we build that rapport, that's all we want as human beings, is to be acknowledged, to be of value in some way. When you take the time and you train yourself to listen, to be present, to listen to their preferences and modalities and how to use the right language to communicate with them and to teach them, how could they not feel that sense of like or that sense of compassion and love back to you? So I think, although some people might have had that exposure or that lesson earlier in life, I think NLP can teach us, like you say, I think we can teach people to have that characteristic.
Well, that was the whole point. The whole point was that Virginia Satir and Milton Erickson had graduate students who studied with them who couldn't do what they did. Right. And so then that was the whole point of NLP, was what are they doing? What are they doing? So
that kind of wraps it all up right there.
Yeah, as Larry said, they're perfectly complementary. And some people start, on the hypnosis end and end up learning some NLP, and some people start on the NLP. Like I studied NLP before I studied hypnosis. Right? For some people it's the other way around, but it's really cool. I want to acknowledge I want to do some acknowledging too. I want to thank Glenn and Ben and Todd for being my previewers, and the three of you each gave me pieces, as you all have witnessed by what happened today. It really helped my presentation be much more effective. Thank you. And I also want to thank, and I also want to thank the Oregon Hypnotherapy Association, all of you and everybody who's not here, for giving me this this venue, because I'm not in the classroom right now, and this gave me, having this thing of presenting and really wanting to give you something was a real gift to me. It got me to think about, how do I do what I do?
And I think you did it really well. I think our original conversation is what, like we said earlier, how do we bring hypnosis? How do we bring NLP into a broader arena of people that are receptive to it? And you just boiled that down and you made it so personal and concise that I could see you going and talking with teachers and just giving this demonstration, this presentation, because it's, all they have to do is follow those principles. And I think they would have that. It's a beautiful job. I'm just touched and impressed. Beautiful.
Thank you.
I think one of the gifts that both NLP and hypnotherapy give us is to become more powerful and effective communicators in general, regardless of the context. And so one of my NLP trainers once said that the best NLP and the best hypnotherapy is when it's not really there. And what that means to me is that, I could tell somebody, I'm going to mirror and match your physiology so that we can develop rapport, and just state that to them directly. But that would be weird. If you were like having lunch with somebody or, having a business meeting or something like that, you just do it. You just do it and let them experience the magic. And so you can weave this into your natural way of being in the world, your natural way of communicating with people, so that you just become a powerful and effective communicator. And it's not like you're putting on a show or trying to prove how skilled you are or knowledgeable you are. It's just being with the person and being effective. And that's what I really like about it, is that it can be done anytime, anywhere, with anybody, and helps us stay resourceful while we're doing it, especially if we're with somebody who's very challenging to be with. So, and in the context of teaching, like in traditional education context, that's an ongoing challenge I think every teacher faces, is how do you do that with an entire group of people? So we're really blessed to have these skills behind us.
I think it's beautiful because I'm looking at the full screen and I see this huge bouquet of offerings from everybody, and the common thread that makes us hypnotists or NLPers or whatever you want to call it is what Jean had talked about, and that was the compassion. And when we lead with the heart, we cannot not communicate, cannot not do rapport, cannot not mirror all of that. So you guys are great at it. We're becoming experts.
You're all my teachers. Some of my teachers, all of you. Some of you I don't know very well, but you know, when Joy speaks up and says something, and I haven't really communicated with you, Joy, hardly at all, but each one of us, everybody who's here present and interacting you're all my teachers.
Yeah, so we all embody an authentic magic of our own style. And that's the beauty of appreciation wherever you are in the world.
Mm-hmm.
The flow.
Mm-hmm.
You're here.
Yay. So I got a question. So, you know, I'm on the board and that means I need to present every so often. What do you want me to present about next? So I can start working on it. You don't have to, you can't answer that now, or you can answer that later. But
It'll come to you.
Well,
Since you put that statement out there, you are now being prepared unknowingly for your next presentation. So don't sweat it.
yeah.
right.
And
Exactly.
I don't know that it needs to be Jean, but I still would like to go back to the idea of how do we expand what we do to outside agents of change? You know, how do we influence the influencers? And I don't know that I certainly don't have the answer to that, but that might be something that any of us could think about. How can we take what we know and give it to the people who can use that to make the kinds of changes in the world that are fairly desperately needed?
Well, I just got off of nearly 2 months of doing that with the fire community. And our firefighters, not only the firefighters, but the caterers, the people who clean up the trash, all of those folks are not, they're in desperate need of having their framework changed from fighting the fire aggressively and let's just pound that, and working for 2 weeks and then going home. And in those 2 weeks, you could treat each other like crap or like great or whatever. But it's been an interesting challenge. And with the little NLP and hypnosis that I've had and listening to our conversations here has been very helpful for me to work with, get up in the morning in front of 600 firefighters when it's like 45 degrees out, everybody's cold and they want to go out on the fire line. How do you change their minds, or how do you set them up for success as human beings for that day? So I want to thank all of you for the little bit that I have. And Larry, I'm looking forward to having you, you know, if you're going to fire up a NLP class, I'll be the first one to sign up. So thank you all.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And what I would like to add to that is that if, you know, this is a topic for the future presentation, I would suggest more than one person be on that, because it's all about the collaborative thing. Just like throwing it into one person's lap and then having them put together, you might not get the depth or the variety that you would if you had a group of 3 people and they might break it into 3 pieces from their own experience. So you might have a firefighter's perspective. You might have someone who's basically, or who knows about local politics. You might have some, and you know, like I know there's people in Salem are trying to persuade the city of Salem to put in protected bike lanes, and they're going about it very methodically. They're taking some of these leaders out on bicycle rides just so they can experience to see what it's like, and so on, and so on, and so on. So there are many different people, groups of people who are, it's like writing a persuasive essay, right? Everybody wants to persuade somebody to do something. So everybody in the world is trying to persuade somebody of something. And if we could get 3 different perspectives on this, and how could we give these people more tools to help them be more effective? And so anyway, I would think it would be, you know, the presentation of more than one person. And I would be willing to be part of that.
I was just going to nominate you to chair that committee, Glenn.
I would be happy to do that. That's kind of my area of interest. Even as a magician, that's my area of expert or interest. Like, how do you, you know, how do you not manipulate people, but how do you direct their attention? How do you make them an audience? How do you make them compliant? So
Influence.
Yeah. When a magician invites you on stage and you step up there and he goes, could I have you stand over here? And he moves you to another spot. That's the first step in compliance. If you don't do it, he knows you're going to probably screw up his trick. And so he has other strategies. A good magician, anyway, will have other strategies to work with. So there's always a fallback.
Mhm.
At what point should I turn off the recording? Are we still good?
Well, it's a beautiful day out there where I am.
Yeah.
What about for the rest of you?
I see sunshine.
Well, if we're feeling complete, there might be some OHA business though. I should.
Yeah, I
add.
know. That's what I'm saying.
I'm personally feeling like I'm in this. Oh,
So am I.
Yeah. So I think we all are.
I'm gonna go bust the kayaks out if you guys are gonna do business. We're going kayaking tomorrow, so.
Oh, okay.
Wonderful.
So Joni, should I click stop?
Yeah.
Okay.
and